Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Visionary Entrepreneur. For those of you listening for the first time, this is a podcast where we interview entrepreneurs and high performers to learn about their industries and other business insights and share it with the world. So, Nick, who do we have today?
Today we've got Skye Chilton. Jeff, who is Skye's father, is considered to be the mushroom guru, mushroom godfather of North America. He went to China and found all these medicinal mushrooms that were long lost and brought them over to America and became the biggest medicinal mushroom supplier in North America.
Yeah, and we came across these mushrooms when we started experimenting, putting them in our coffee, and we came across the brand Real Mushrooms, which is Skye's brand, and it is by far more potent than any other brand we've tried. And that's by the way that he grows these mushrooms, different than the U.S. farmers. So we'll get into that in this episode. But super interesting conversation about this huge growing market and how he transitioned from being a part of Nammex to just starting his own mushroom supplement company.
Yeah, you would think, oh, these two nutcases putting mushrooms in their coffee, but the science has proven mushrooms help with immune system, they help with your focus, they help with your endurance. Those are all scientifically proven studies that really do have an effect. It's like having a coffee on top of your coffee and a lasting effect. So try it out. Incredible space and great episode.
Hope you guys enjoy. So, Nick and I, we discovered mushrooms like 3 or 4 months ago, and it's been something that we've been using a lot, obviously for the health benefits. And we tried a bunch of different brands and Real Mushrooms. There was obviously a clear difference there. And everyone that we talk to, they don't really understand what the hell we're doing with these mushrooms. A lot of people are thinking psychedelics, or they're thinking, what are you talking about? You're putting mushrooms in your coffee? That sounds crazy. Obviously, there's some part of the market that's catching on. It is growing in popularity. But if, for people who might not know much about this, could you kind of explain what the benefits are and how your product is differently? You see that mushroom in the US is obviously grown very differently, and there's the start pH, which is not as potent as what your product is. So maybe if you can explain the difference there as well as the benefits.
Sure. Yeah. Speaking to the benefits, so mushrooms in general they're primarily immunomodulators. So they're helping to modulate our immune system. So not necessarily, say, an immune booster, which a lot of times it gets phrased that way. But it's more of a regulation thing. And so that's why you say, like, Dane, you might feel like completely different effects from Nick, just because your bodies are different, your genes are different, your everyday stressors are going to be different. So, for example, like a lot of people taking reishi will take it in the evenings and it'll help them with sleep, where someone else might find it stimulating and they won't be able to sleep if they take it at night. And it's just the difference in our bodies, around a lot of different factors. But most of it is around just regulating our immune system, making sure that we're in balance. Certain mushrooms do get geared more towards certain things, say like cordyceps and endurance or athletics, and say like lion's mane as a nootropic or like a brain supplement. Even though there's like there's a lot of crossover in the different ones when you really dive into the research. In terms of the quality aspect, we have to look at the different stages that these fungal species are going through. So primarily, we have the mushroom, which most people are familiar with, which is also called the fruiting body. So that's what we see in the grocery store with, like, say, the button mushroom. And then we have the root system of the mushroom, which is called mycelium. So mycelium is growing, all throughout the woods. It is sort of the body, so it's also termed the vegetative body. So we have the fruiting body and we have the vegetative body. So it is sort of the main body of this organism that is out there. It is breaking down organic matter. It is gathering nutrients. And then when the environmental conditions are correct, it's going to produce the mushroom. So once the mushroom is fully formed, then it releases spores, which you can think of as seeds. And these get released out into the air and fly around. And then once the conditions for them are correct, they'll germinate. And we have this life cycle starting over. And so this is really important with mushroom, mycelium, and spore, is that you have products that get made from each one of these steps, each one of these pieces of this life cycle. And so it's really important to know which part is actually in the product. And so there's a lot of products out there that get marketed as mushroom, but actually don't have any of the mushroom in them. And so this is where companies will grow the root system. So they'll grow mycelium, and they'll grow that on a grain substrate. So if you're familiar with the food product tempeh, tempeh is an Indonesian food where they take cooked soybeans and they inject a fungus onto it, and it grows out and makes this sort of white grain cake that is served as a food. This is a similar process where you're taking, say, reishi mycelium, you're injecting it into sterile grain, it's growing out and it's forming this grain log, which is then being dried and powdered and sold as a mushroom supplement when there are no of the actual mushrooms present. So a lot of times this is also known as mushroom or mycelium biomass or grain spawn. So most mushroom growers, if they're growing for the fresh market, will know grain spawn because they'll basically take this myceliated grain, they'll throw that on some straw, and they'll use that as sort of the seed to actually grow mushrooms later on, which will go to the fresh market. But companies now are taking this myceliated grain and they're marketing that as a supplement.
Yeah, I think so. The main lesson from the whole biology lesson that we just got, which I'm very grateful for, but the main lesson is that your product has more beta glucans equals more benefits equals more potency in immunity, or endurance or neurotropics or whatever it is. And I can attest to that, but have you ever done any scientific studies? Like, I think the problem in this space is because it is still pretty small, in my opinion,
Yep.
that the money invested and the awareness in this space, that nobody regulates it, there's not enough scientific studies that people respect and stuff like that. Do you know any scientific studies that are made right now, or are you involved in, or anything like that?
Most, if you have a science background, you can go and read papers and look at that and like, no problem. But there's a disconnect when it comes to, okay, how do I know which product is consistent with this paper? And that's where a lot of stuff breaks down. It's like, oh, reishi does X, Y, and Z. I'm going to go buy this product at the local store. I don't know what's in there. Could be anything for that matter, There's some regulation. I mean, supplements do fall under the FDA, but it's minimally enforced for that matter. Like the FDA is looking into more serious matters where people could be harmed or where things are being spiked with bad substances or false claims around that. And so there's definitely labeling issues that are at play, but they're not just very, very low priority in terms of kind of a regulatory type thing.
I wanted to dive into a little bit more of the financial focus of the industry. And you guys grow your mushrooms in China, and obviously, in today's society, that's kind of, a hot topic, is, doing business in China and whatnot. And I've heard you say that growing them in the US, the way that you guys do it, would be next to impossible because the cost would be so high. So maybe you could touch on financially why that's the case. Why is that so difficult? And then also financially, where is this, mushroom market going? Because obviously we're seeing increased popularity, but what needs to happen for this to really explode?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so with mushroom growing, we can grow mushrooms for the fresh market in North America. Totally fine. We've got the button mushroom in the grocery stores. I mean, if you're lucky enough, you might have shiitake or, a local mushroom grower who's got lion's mane or something like that. But all of these mushrooms are roughly 90% water. So if I'm selling you, say, I think the US growers were getting maybe $5 a pound for shiitake last year. And then say basically $10 a kilo. When I dry that out, I now have 1/10 the weight. So I have to sell that 1 kilo to you for $100 in order to get that fresh market weight. And that's where really the economics of it start to break down. So basically this 1 kilo is $100. Now I have to grind it into a powder. I have to extract it. I have to turn it back into a powder. I have to add, margin in, all that kind of stuff. And when you look at, some of the extracts that we have that are, say, 16-1 or a 10-1 extract, where essentially we're taking 10 kilos and turning it into 1 kilo. So with shiitake, say, all right, my starting material is now $1,000 without even doing any kind of extraction. And this is just where the numbers don't work. And shiitake is probably one of the cheapest sort of medicinal mushrooms that you can produce when you're talking about, say, like a reishi or something like that. The costs are just going to go up from there. I mean, there are, people who go out foraging and make their own tinctures, which is great. That approach is really good. But in terms of sort of mass market scale, there's nobody doing it in North America. And so that's why this myceliated grain has grown instead, because it's very cheap, it's very scalable. You just need, a grain source, you sterilize it, you inject it with your mycelium culture, put it in an incubator, let it grow out, dry it, powder it. It can turn around in maybe 30 to 45 days, somewhere in that amount of time. And it's super cheap. I mean, when the majority of it is grain, it's very cheap and very scalable. And I mean, they sell that stuff, really, really cheap. So you see, it's enticing to other brands if they believe that what they're buying is mushroom, and that's a lot of times how it's pitched, and the price is low, it's kind of tough for them to say no. And so other brands who are using these ingredients, they don't really know too much about mushrooms, and they want to add, who knows, reishi or cordyceps into a coffee product or something else. And they're, for all intents and purposes, they believe it's mushroom, but it's not. And who knows what it is, but then you get these multiple levels of confusion happening, which ends up, almost like a bad game of telephone for the consumer at the end of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see that in all sorts of industries at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Our last podcast guest was big into coffee. He has specialty. It was like the first American specialty coffee importer from Central America, and the supply chain in coffee, the classic supply chain in coffee, is also that really bad telephone at the end of the day.
Do you guys ever run into any problems with China or any kind of, discussions around that? Do people ever give you heck for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's people who are always going to believe that anything from China is bad. And I mean, is there polluted areas of China? Of course there is. I mean, we've got, areas in the US where you can't drink the water. There's, outbreaks of salmonella in certain food products every year that we have here too. There's like flour kind of things, but those kind of get brushed to the side, and yeah. I mean, I think we're always going to be dealing with that no matter what. There's always a stigma behind it. But China produces over 90% of the world's mushrooms. They've been growing mushrooms for, 800 years. They have research institutes that are set up for researching mushrooms, for whether it's for like medicinal or even just like cultivating. So they're constantly optimizing. There's probably more mushroom researchers in China than the rest of the world combined. So it's really, it's the mecca for mushrooms in a sense. And it's hard to ignore that. So we can either put it aside and do something that's not mushrooms, or we can embrace that and try and bring a higher level of quality to that, which is what my father did when he brought organic certifiers over to China in the mid 90s and helped set up the first organic growers over there. And then we were one of the first companies to sell organic mushroom extracts to North America.
It would need to happen for mushrooms in the US, that the price of growing them would come down. Like, why is China so much cheaper? I mean, they have the knowledge and they have obviously cheaper labor and things like that. But would there be in a dreamland a solution that like the US can start producing really cheap mushrooms?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe more mechanization. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a lot of it, well, certainly need a better overall supply chain. Yeah, that's a big.
Like what is in China? Is in place in China that makes it so cheap?
I'm not sure if they get any agricultural subsidies over there. That could
Mm-hmm.
be part of it. I mean, certainly the labor is cheaper, but it's relative in a sense to where, like, say something that's $5 here is like 5 yuan over there.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like the forex conversion for us, it makes it a lot cheaper. So there's that sort of component, but it's not like we're talking slave labor over there. They're living normal lives with,
Mm.
cell phones, computers, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who have specialized in it there for like multiple generations. So I don't know if it's a knowledge piece that it needs to catch up, as well as you need a very large scale of being able to develop the like sawdust and inoculation to like scale that out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few different components, and China probably eats the most mushrooms per capita too. So they're also at that monster scale level to
Yeah.
where it gets a lot cheaper. And we've visited some mechanized facilities outside of Shanghai that were just amazing, like nonstop mushrooms on trays just moving into packing rooms like 24/7 kind of thing. And that's just like one warehouse out of many. And you can't even imagine the scale in a certain sense, because
Mm-hmm.
there's just so many people over there, and most people I think eat mushrooms almost on a daily basis. Whenever we're over there, it's like every meal has some sort of mushroom dish which is amazing. It's just such a good food, and it's a good one to incorporate into your diet, whether it's via supplements or just eating them as food.
Mm-hmm.
So you've seen kind of both sides, with the success of Nammex being a producer, and then now with Real Mushrooms, you've seen kind of a new perspective of creating a product and marketing it. What would you say the biggest challenges are that you've faced since you started Real Mushrooms, whether it be, finding wholesalers, creating partnerships, marketing the product? What would you say were the biggest challenges for you so far?
Yeah, biggest challenges. I mean, certainly scale has been a tough one. And when you have, I mean, we're seeing a pretty high demand at the moment, and just being able to do proper projections for inventory and basically all the pieces coming into play, whether it's like the extract powders, whether it's like your packaging, your labeling, each one has its own lead times, and sort of making sure that those all mesh together, so that you have enough inventory, but you don't want to order too much because you don't want too much money sitting in your inventory. That's like a pretty massive challenge that we're constantly working through. Uh, Getting off the ground, I think the initial like uptake is always hard. That was at least probably a year plus to just like drive buzz, and like I don't know, I was probably working on just a straight email list for the first 6+ months with like no product, and just out there talking mushrooms and trying to educate people on like a one-on-one basis. So the start off was certainly hard to, I think, when we rebranded, that was a pretty big project in itself. And you're always second guessing new designs or like new packaging. Is this going to work? Like, I think it's good, but some people hate it. Some people like it. And at some point you just have to go and do it. Uh, but these are always coming up, and there's always new challenges. And so that's, what makes this fun every day, is just having new challenges that are always putting up new problems in front of you.
Have you ever talked to any retailers or anything like that?
Yeah, retail I have ignored for a little bit, but we tried it out last year Let me grab water quick. We got in with a big food distributor, and everything was good. We shipped them product. We were selling a little bit here and there. And then all of a sudden we see like these resellers popping up on our Amazon listings, selling our products. I'm like, who are these brands? And, I hit Google and start like digging down into it, and then end up tracking them back to our distributor sales. And then I'm like starting to work the numbers, and I'm like, oh man, like 80% of our distributor sales that are supposed to be going into retail accounts to give us more kind of retail brand exposure are actually just like going onto our Amazon listings and just poaching our sales. Yeah. So that was pretty disheartening, and not a good experience. And so retail is certainly, it's a tough nut to crack, and it takes a lot of resources and a lot of time to really develop relationships with a lot of different, there's a lot of different routes you can go, whether it's with a big distributor or whether you want to do it yourself with sort of like regional people or select accounts. And we've right now have primarily focused on health practitioners. So we're trying to do a lot more, get into more dispensaries and different health practices, as well as educating them on mushrooms so that they can go and educate their patients. And health practitioners know other health practitioners. So we get a lot of referral from that. And it's been, I think, a good strategy so far, as kind of like practitioners as well as focusing online, which is just so easy for the most part.
I mean, what I could imagine would be an issue with finding these retail, these wholesale partnerships, is communicating the value that you have with your product, because they're sitting there with, where we have a mushroom brand and they sell it to us cheaper or whatever it is, but they don't understand the quality difference or whatever. So how do you communicate your message, and how do you establish these partnerships to where, obviously the route that you're taking now, they're able to see, the value, but that must be challenging. And how do you grow those partnerships?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge there when they've got, who knows, 3 or 4 brands that are selling well. And it's like, why are we going to take you on? Your price point's higher, potentially. You're semi-unknown. And so that's going to always be a fight. And then it's like, okay, you've got to pay for extra advertising in there. Do you have to like train up their staff around mushrooms now? Like I've another buddy who's pretty heavy into retail. He's constantly having to train the sales staff. So he's holding, maybe now sort of when everything's remote now, he's doing at least every week or two, he's kind of doing webinar calls with the sales reps, and just basically like, here you go, here's all the different benefits, this is why this is better, as well as like giving out tons of samples to them so that they can try the products. And so it's
a huge cost.
Yeah, both like with money and with time. And so you need like a really long-term approach to that. Like it's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Do you ever sell any of your products overseas, internationally?
We do ship international. We've done a little bit of Amazon UK, which was difficult. So turkey tail is actually not approved as a food ingredient in the EU.
Oh, wow.
So we were unable to sell anything with turkey tail. And then there's a few different labeling requirements that we've run into issues with. And so we have, I think, tried twice now, and it just hasn't really clicked. And then we might run into some inventory shortages, so we can't ship over there. And but I'd certainly love to be there, but it's almost, then you need another variation of your product, which has a separate label. And more logistics, basically. Like lots of it just comes back to logistics and supply chain.
Yeah. I mean, I think the US market is way big enough for mushrooms to just grow incredibly. I mean, other brands have done it. It's just that other brands don't have the integrity that you guys have, and that's sort of the brands that we search for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've tried to focus on the US and Canada and really make sure that all of our stock levels are good there and totally set before we really want to start to branch out further. I'd love to be in the EU. I'd love to be in Australia. And we've had a number of requests, to get in there, and it's just, yeah, not going to happen right now, but it's certainly on our roadmap. And it's just a matter of, time for that matter. And so
as far as growth, what would you say is one of your number one goals right now? Is it increasing your marketing presence, your brand presence? Is it establishing more relationships with some of these retailers, or what's kind of the next step for you? What you would like to see for growth?
yeah, I mean, we always want to see growth. I'm sort of less focused on the actual dollar figures in a sense. Like those are good kind of secondary indicators. I mean, we do have goals around that kind of stuff, but it's really secondary markers for me of like, okay, are we getting new products out? So we've got a couple new products that we're launching in the next 2 months here. They're pretty excited with. And then, yeah, brand exposure, I think, is like, are we putting together partnerships that are going to work in the long term? So
Mhm.
specifically around different advertising platforms, or, really starting to hone in our teams as well and develop our processes and our teams to where, they're really solid and they can operate to the fullest of their abilities without too much oversight. So it's really starting to put in a proper, structure and framework as we grow, because that's going to be one of like the biggest challenges as you scale up is your personnel and how that shifts as you grow. I think I can't remember if it's the scaling up book or not, but basically say like every multiple of 3 with your
Yep.
employees breaks everything.
Yeah, I have
Or
read
yeah,
that. I think I think it is a multiple of 3. It's like, yeah, every time and then something breaks and you got to reformulate the whole structure.
yeah. So most of your SOPs will break or something like that. So you're constantly having to like redo that. And so, yeah, that's like a massive part of the growth is just to scale up with it and scale your team with it. And what can you automate in there? Like we try and, use computers as much as we can. Like my background is software and tech and that kind of thing. So I try and bring that in as much as we can, because I know that that'll help us scale a lot quicker in terms of like onboarding more people. And we try and be as lean as possible. And I mean, like, 5 years ago, I think there was 3 of us, and now there's maybe 15. So we were, getting by pretty good with a really small team, but now we've had to grow a lot more. But part of that is, can you bridge, your the people with tax to where you don't, I'd say a leaner is always better if you can get more done. It's nice to be able to say you have all these employees, but if it's not producing the actual productivity, then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, completely.
Summer.
Have you have you I know you put mushrooms in your coffee just like us, but have you ever thought about coming out with a coffee specific mushroom product?
Yeah, I mean, that's people have definitely asked us that. I don't like instant packs, so I just hate the
Like
excess pack.
for Sigmatic?
Yeah, I mean, I know their team. I know the founders. They're all good people. I'm just not a fan of excess packaging through stick packs.
Yes.
So that really keeps me away of any kind of single serving type product, even
Hmm.
though they are very convenient and people love them. I just don't want to do them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nick and I have been messing around. I mean, we've been kind of creating our
Yeah,
own different
our
varieties.
friend is who's also a health freak has got us who really got us into it has exactly as Dan said, start creating our own variety with a bunch of other superfoods in it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And we sort of got inspired by Laird Hamilton as well. I don't know.
Yeah, they
His
just had a massive IPO the other day.
They did, yeah, they did unbelievably well.
I think though
Mm-hmm.
that the problem is that a lot of people, like you said, try to get into the instant coffee market, but I think the coffee market is too hard to break into from that perspective. So if you just take care of the powder, the supplement, and all the things that you need, maybe let the consumer take care of the coffee themselves. You know?
Yeah, that was our original thoughts too. Is like, okay, I'm gonna just give you this mushroom powder, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can like put it in your smoothie, you can make a tea, you can put it in your coffee. I like the flexibility of it. It turned out that the majority of our customers wanted capsules instead. So,
Interesting.
uh, yeah. So yeah, we sell a lot more capsules than we do the powders. Even though I guess I rarely take the capsules unless I'm traveling, maybe. So for the most part, I'm just adding powder into usually coffee or some kind of shake or something like that, depending. So yeah, that was an interesting, I guess, not really a pivot or anything like that, but just changing, seeing customer demand and reacting to that. And, balancing that because you're going to get different people asking for everything. Like someone's going to say, I want this mushroom or that mushroom, or you should have it. And
Yeah.
unless you're really seeing a pattern or a trend or trying to hit the trend before it kind of gets going. Sort of like, I mean, we're releasing tremella probably next week or the week after, and that's been a slow grower, and I think it's will do well and slowly grow, and it's more and more people are going to learn about it. And
Yeah.
What's really blown my mind is that people like the organic type people, they kind of have seen the mushroom evolution, but then your general just US
Average
population, a lot of
Joe,
people
or
don't.
even not the average Joe, the like the
Yeah. So, I mean, like I talk to my friends, I'm like, yeah, I put mushroom in my coffee. They're like, are you insane? Like you're like, why are you putting mushrooms in your coffee? But then I tell them, well, look, it makes me feel great the whole day, right? Like I'm focused, I feel
yeah.
balanced, and I don't feel like this crazy crash and all this stuff. And then they're like, where can I sign up? And that's where I think there's a huge gap. Is your typical organic person, I think, has a lot of knowledge, but once this regular consumer, because everyone is becoming organic conscious more and more, once the regular
Mhm.
consumer starts getting a hold of it and really understands the effects, I think that's when this market's just going to explode.
Yeah.
When you have people like bankers who are taking it for the benefit.
Yeah, I think bulletproof coffee's kind of pulled that along too.
Honestly, like that's what Nick and I would love to do at some point, is just build a network of people who are like-minded, who are in, have integrity, they're entrepreneurs, they're thinking creatively, and just build a solid network, whether it
Yeah.
be like you with our past guests or whoever. I mean, obviously we're just
Mhm.
starting out, but our goal is not to create this, crazy flashy whatever. We're trying to really like provide value
Yeah.
and connect people.
What I think what we really, because we have a finance background as well, what I think what we
Yeah.
really want to do is take something with integrity and something like a cool new product like yours, and whoever is willing or is looking for any help, that we can also provide them some sort of networking help, or able to grow it. Because I think that's something that Lair did really well. Him having his house in Malibu and his pool where all the big CEOs come and hang out with him. I think
Oh,
that's
the
how,
XPT or whatever.
yeah, I think he ran this for a while. Friends of ours have been over there as well. I was supposed to go, but the fires didn't let me.
Uh,
And I think what he's done so well is that he took this like turmeric creamer and some mushrooms, or it's mainly the turmeric creamer and like the healthy creamer, and put it into coffee and
yeah.
combined, so made it available for the regular average Joe, to be like, wow, this is really cool coffee product. And the same with Bulletproof. That's
Mhm.
why he's doing so great.
I can't tell you how much Nick and I have just gotten from our conversations with people, and I think that aspect of it, of just being around like-minded people, especially during COVID, during a time where you just cannot connect with people, finding a way to bring people together and share ideas. And we had James Altucher, who was on our podcast, and he
Sweet.
basically talked about how unbelievable important sharing ideas is, because that is the stem of innovation. And people, I think,
Yeah.
are it's slowing down with COVID and everyone working from home. So if we can create a network of people like you, people, I mean, we haven't started anything, but we're aspiring to do something, and I think that's the goal. So
No, that's great. I mean, yeah, network is huge. Like, can you get mentors in there as well. Like I always think about it just from, joining up with my dad, and, I knew about mushrooms and I grew up around mushrooms. So I already had some of that background, but within, say, like a year, just being under him and getting his guidance, I ended up knowing more about, say, mushroom products than 90% of people out there. And that can apply to basically anything if you get the right mentor.
Very true. Well, we really appreciate the time you've given us, and we'll be sure to push real mushrooms, because I mean it is definitely way more superior than the other products we've tried, and everyone should go check out your foraging videos on real mushrooms. Those were real good entertainment for me today. So.
Yeah, it's good for the city people. If you don't get out foraging, I guess I kind of take those for granted when I just to get out to walk out my back door and go find some mushrooms and pick them and eat them for dinner or breakfast or something like that. But yeah, man, it's been a great conversation, and I was like super happy to come on and talk mushrooms with you guys. And let's keep in touch.
Sounds great.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you.
We love that. We'll definitely push some ideas your way and think creatively to help you out, or ask for advice or anything like that.